Good morning and welcome to our Sunday presentation. United Lodge of Theosophists, Washington, D.C. meets every Sunday at 11 a.m. for the discussion of a particular topic. Today's presentation will be on an age of transition, and next week the topic will be the Earth Chain. Please also note that we meet every first and third Sunday of the month at 12:30 p.m. to read and discuss selected theosophical writings. We're currently having roundtable discussions on the ocean of Theosophy. Our lodge is guided by its declaration, which states the following. The policy of this lodge is independent devotion to the cause of Theosophy, without professing attachment to any theosophical organization. It is loyal to the great founders of the theosophical movement, but does not concern itself with dissensions or differences of individual opinion. The work it has on hand and the end it keeps in view are too absorbing and too lofty to leave it the time or inclination to take part in side issues. That work and that end is the dissemination of the fundamental principles of the philosophy of Theosophy, and the exemplification and practice of those principles through a truer realization of the self, a profounder conviction of universal brotherhood. It holds that the unassailable basis for union among Theosophists, wherever and however situated, is similarity of aim, purpose, and teaching, and therefore has neither constitution, bylaws, nor officers, the sole bond between its associates being that basis. And it aims to disseminate this idea among Theosophists in the furtherance of unity. It regards as Theosophists all who are engaged in the true service of humanity, without distinction of race, creed, sex, condition, or organization. And it welcomes to this association all those who are in accord with its declared purposes and who desire to fit themselves, by study and otherwise, to be the better able to help and teach others. The true Theosophist belongs to no cult or sect, yet belongs to each and all. Today's reading comes from the Bhagavad Gita. He who, while living in this world and before the liberation of the soul from the body, can resist the impulse arising from desire and anger is a devotee and blessed. The man who is happy within himself, who is illuminated within, is a devotee, and partaking of the nature of the Supreme Spirit, he is merged in it. Such illuminated sages, whose sins are exhausted, who are free from delusion, who have their senses and organs under control, and devoted to the good of all creatures, obtain assimilation with the Supreme Spirit. Assimilation with the Supreme Spirit is on both sides of death, for those who are free from desire and anger, temperate, of thoughts restrained, and who are acquainted with the true self. The anchorite who shutteth his placid soul away from all sense of touch, with gaze fixed between his brows, who maketh the breath to pass through both his nostrils, with evenness alike in inspiration and expiration, whose senses and organs together with his heart and understanding are under control, and who hath set his heart upon liberation, and is ever free from desire and anger, is emancipated from birth and death, even in this life. Knowing that I, the great Lord of all worlds, am the enjoyer of all sacrifices and penances, and the friend of all creatures, he shall obtain me and be blessed. And now for today's talk.
Thank you. Welcome, friends. An age of transition. Complacent human nature seems incapable of perceiving the approach of impending forces and arouses itself only when the most dire effects have already begun. The masses in the last century came to realize the chaotic condition of human society only after World War I began. The League of Nations was founded to inaugurate an era of lasting peace and cooperation. Here and there, there have since been voices raised in favor of the principles of human interdependence, national self-determination, international cooperation, and other such lofty ideals. suggesting theosophical objectives. Why? No mere precipitation of karmic effects can usher in a better period unless deep-rooted causes of past and present evils are recognized and removed. There is a vast difference between the philosophy of Theosophy, pure and simple, and merely theosophical ideals. Ideals held without knowledge of their spiritual basis fail to carry conviction in a scientific age when reasons are sought and required. Even those professing such ideals too often abandon their idealistic programs and fall in line with more practical, quote, in other words, separative and selfish policies, even though they interfere with actions impacting all of us, like climate change. They have but poured new wine into old bottles. Theosophical ideals can never be sustained on either sectarian or materialistic grounds. Theosophy alone furnishes a scientific basis for ethics and is able to demonstrate the disastrous results of the separative and grasping policies pursued by races and nations. Without a rational explanation of things, people must and will continue to hug the illusion that it is possible to force events and circumstances into supposedly ideal patterns. H.P. Blavatsky declared that each should strive to be a center of work in himself. When his inner development has reached a certain point, he will naturally draw others with whom he is in contact, and a center from which information and spiritual influence will radiate. Theosophical ideas have entered into every development or form which awakening spirituality has assumed. Yet Theosophy, pure and simple, has still a severe battle to fight for recognition. But there are the few who realize intuitively that the recognition of pure Theosophy, the philosophy of the rational explanation of things, is most vitally important to furnish the beacon light to guide humanity. The new age, which will succeed the present period of transition, will not be ushered in through any miracle, but through great pain and great sacrifice to lay a foundation resting on spirit for future generations. And it is only this way that we can keep the link unbroken. The greatest need of humanity in any age is psychological and mental balance. The achievement of balance requires a grasp of philosophy, the deliberative assessment of all human values according to their relationship with individually established principles. The unrecognized curse of today's civilization is that we have been induced to substitute the specious security of dogma for self-induced investigation. When the medieval man sought the comfortable security afforded by reliance upon pronouncements of the church, he set in motion a chain of psychological causes and effects which have influenced every subsequent century. But many now realize that heaven is not simply the reward in the future for unthinking virtue in the present, but that it is a state which must be created here on earth by our dedicated labors. We can either be content with purely materialistic evaluation of the world and of man, or hold to a higher purpose and a greater end. in which case the machine state must be rejected as lacking spiritual values and is morally debilitating. Intuitive philosopher educators of the last century noted that the course which our society is taking is so catastrophic that one is forced to rethink for himself all sorts of basic theoretical questions, which in a happier age could have been more or less taken for granted. Such questions are those of the concept of progress, the basis for making material judgments, the precise usefulness of science to human ends, and the nature of man himself. We should grasp the matter by its root, the root for mankind being man himself. A new approach is desperately needed because the social realities of our day are intolerable. Horrors have been committed by the governments of so-called civilized nations, which could hardly have been improved on by Attila. Crude war weapons, with their relatively few casualties in bygone days, have been replaced by highly lethal weapons, and human and economic costs associated have become staggering. Modern warfare having become so insanely destructive that the seeds of a new order are wiped out along with the old order. Mr. Judge wrote in The Ocean of Theosophy that in an age of transition, when every system of thought, science, religion, government, and society is changing, old days of dogmatism are gone, and the age of inquiry has come. The larger cycle of Western development began during the 14th century in response to the occult impulse originating in the East. In the 15th century, America was discovered. Then came the Reformation of the revival of Greek philosophy. The 17th century saw the birth of modern science and the beginnings of intellectual liberation, followed in the 18th century by the political struggles of the era of revolution. Then the message of the 18th century, culminating with that brought by HPB as messenger of the masters, which heralded the new age to come. Mr. Judge wrote, with the single exceptions of the writings of Plato, no one in modern times has given the world any approximation of a complete philosophy previous to the appearance of HPB's secret doctrine. We are now in a transition period. There will be a revival of genuine philosophy, and the secret doctrine will be the basis of the new philosophy. HPB used all those elements of truth which had been assimilated by Western thought from former efforts of the adepts, giving a new embodiment of the age-old wisdom religion. Her recordings were so complete, it will take centuries before much more is given. The actual processes of this universal age of transition should be a subject of intense interest and study. The work of the Theosophical movement is threefold: to clear the ground, to fertilize and prepare the soul, and most importantly, to plant seeds of truth in the open furrow. The last task falls only to conscious servants of the Theosophical cause, with their many unconscious collaborators in the indirect and preparatory phases of the movement. As the lines of the movement come together, constituting the foundation for the next great evolutionary impulse, more may be drawn into closer communion with the Theosophical fraternity and join their wills to the one spiritual will which keeps the movement in being. The day of man's childhood as an immortal being has passed away. The time must come when the really advanced thinkers will be compelled to lay by their indifference and their scorn and conceit and follow the lines of philosophical investigation laid down in the secret doctrine. If knowledge be refused, the grossest and vilest superstition or the most appalling materialism will result. The process of transition spoken of by Mr. Judge has been his declaration that there is no truth except practice of living truth. In its largest significance, the whole pragmatic movement is essentially a moral criticism of the separation of thought and action, the fatal defect of Western civilization. Pragmatists started out as true lovers of mankind. They represented a genuine revival of the humanitarianism of early Western science. Pragmatists were enemies not of the pantheistic deity of the ancients, but of the jealous Jehovah whose deluded followers had made European lands run with rivers of blood. They were successful in that great endeavor, but gradually became secularized, leaving behind only the non-moral method of science, divorced from its original inspiration. Ethics became merely a department of philosophical speculation. During the scientific age, religions fell into lingering decay, while science has continued with its irresponsible conquest of nature. It may be said that Theosophy is meaningless without the conception of the Gnosis, a body of knowledge with its knowers and teachers. But the claim of the Church to its divine revelation marked the ultimate corruption of the idea of the Gnosis. Hence the part of Western tradition which represents the titanic effort of freedom-loving man to throw off the shackles of a false revelation is set dead against admission of the existence of a body of knowledge of any description. Until the energies of that great reaction are exhausted, it will be difficult for free spirits to recognize the possibility of a true gnosis and respect to the race as a whole. First and foremost, there must be perception of the universal need of affirmative ethical principles. Plato's world of immutable ideas which are repudiated with evangelical fervor. Mr. Judge addressed such repudiation by quoting Krishna's statement, quote, "Effacement in the Supreme Spirit is gained by the right-seeing sage whose senses are exhausted, who hath cut asunder all doubts, whose sense and organs are under control, and who is devoted to the well-being of all creatures." Unquote. Theosophy emphasizes the absolute necessity of practical brotherhood. High philosophy, asceticism, personal virtues, all these are barren when pursued in avoidance of the practical service of one's fellows. Mr. Judge, in living the higher life, impressed upon us that the real means of progress for us mortals are the simple duties to our own families and to our own nation, or kindness and patriotism in the highest ethical sense of the terms. Failure to discharge these immediate obligations brings terrible karmic penalties. Ralph Waldo Emerson said, "Let us affront and reprimand the smooth mediocrity and squalid contentment of the times, and hurl in the face of custom and trade and office the fact which is the upshot of all history, that there is a great responsible thinker and actor working wherever a man works, that a true man belongs to no other time or place, but is the center of things. Where he is, there is nature." Mr. Judge said, "The ancient doctrines of Theosophy have been embodied in unknown languages and symbols and recorded in books inaccessible to Western minds to the late 1800s. Far beyond all this inaccessibility, however, is a cause preventing those old truths from reaching modern minds, has been the prejudice, the scorn, and contempt of ancient learning manifested by the leaders of modern thought and its materialistic tendency. A complete science of metaphysics and a complete philosophy of science are not yet even conceived of as possible. Hence the ancient wisdom, by its very vastness, has escaped recognition in modern times. The decline of metaphysical studies in the modern university was an inevitable sequence of the rise of the modern scientific method and the dominant motive behind human activities today. The acquirement of things and luxuries which have been the product of science. Philosophy had its first development in the West as a handmaiden of theology. Science tells us that all such intangibles are idle dreams, and the apparently rational character of metaphysics is a specious disguise. It is, of course, a delusion of modern science thought that there can be any kind of science without metaphysical foundations. Every generalized principle is rooted in some metaphysical idea. Every ethical conception assumes a unity among human beings. Every motive sustained in human action is justified by metaphysical argument. But because metaphysics is out of fashion, we do not admit our philosophizing even to ourselves. Theosophical aphorisms on karma state, the action of karma may be known by calculation from cause to effect, and this calculation is possible because the effect is wrapped up in and is not succeeded to the cause. Modern education accumulates mountains of facts as a substitute for thinking about ends, thus leapfrogging over an assured philosophical grasp. A philosophy which commands authority within ourselves and which can give us criteria by which to interpret facts. And so long as education is dominated by a theory of knowledge which recognizes only the discoveries of the sense perception as true, it will develop no philosophy worthy of the name. Genuine freedom rests in the trained power of thought, but studies which produce trained thinking have had little place in today's schools. In the key to Theosophy, HPB contrasted the two major types of education. There's first the respectable classical education, which has become impractical and ineffective, quote, arid with pedantry, unquote. She has a way with words. Then there are the coldly efficient technical and professional schools that turn out skilled specialists who are otherwise narrowly ignorant, and the business schools which instruct simply in commercial procedures and selling techniques. The progressive education movement was a frontal attack on the old classical schooling, but because it possessed no philosophical values around which to organize its progress, the disastrous effects of liberation have already become evident to the thoughtful teachers. Just as the time when we have the greatest need for traditional wisdom of the human race, we find that educators have banished from the curriculum the sources where wisdom may be found. The great practical issues of our time are not new, but have always existed. The conversations of Socrates raise questions that are even more urgent today than when Plato wrote them, because the society in which Plato lived did not need to have them raised as much as we do. We have forgotten how important they are. What Plato taught was contemporary in every age. That is why it is classic. HPB said in Isis Unveiled that it is the Platonic philosophy, the most elaborate compend of the abstruse systems of old India, that alone affords a middle ground between the archaic wisdom religion and modern thought. Plato affirmed 23 centuries ago that ideas rule the world. Education should fit men to choose the best ruling ideas, and a disciplined study of great books will develop in them the necessary discrimination. Among the classics are many works saturated with the spirit of the Theosophical movement. In some instances, these books form a direct implantation of the teachings given. Plato and Aeschylus were initiates. Cicero's writings are full of theosophical conceptions. Plutarch was a teacher of the Neoplatonic school, and in a later period, Spinoza represented an important current of theosophical influence. A generation of young men and women taught to understand and appreciate the thought of these great men of the past will have learned how to think for themselves. They would quickly discard the shallow prejudices of modern materialism and search for truth with self-reliant minds. Their influence would help to overcome what Mr. Judge called the obscurity of the present age in regard to genuine philosophical thought, which he said is nowhere more apparent than in the manner in which opposition has been waged toward these doctrines of karma and reincarnation. Mr. Judge said that as our civilization is based on force and devoid of a true philosophical basis, the newest race in America will more quickly than any other show the effect of false teachings and corrupted religion. But out of anger and disturbance will arise a new and better time, yet not without the pain which accompanies every new birth. Today's era of enlightened selfishness is failing. We can no longer exercise enough shrewdness to protect ourselves from the maze of interests, powers, influences, propaganda, and other forces which surround us. Another kind of foundation, very different from self-interest, must be provided if modern society is to survive and advance. All this points to the necessity of continued integration of ethics, morality, and even spirituality into our almost totally materialistic education system. All should take to heart publications of the Theosophical movement for October 2019 on page 3 on Intuition, Some Reflections, where, among other things, it quotes Steve Jobs as saying, intuition is more important than intellect, as well as on educational reform for November 2019 and December 2019, continued on page, they're both on page 14 of both of each month. The publications which linked intuition with conscious and experience influenced by ancient values. The website is here, http www.ultindia.org /previous issues.html. We can plant seed ideas today to take root in education standards for tomorrow. We are making progress in that direction. That's quite apparent just in this student's understanding of the changes in education during the generations in his lifetime. But there's a lot of progress that needs to be made in the future. And I will end the formal presentation with this and open the floor to discussion.
So then, with this presentation, is a suggestion that instead of teaching the students in classrooms memory-oriented remembrance, should then these seed ideas be implanted and let the mind kind of roam as to where it needs to go? Because if we're going to cultivate each human being on the lines of what they have brought as a gift, then that has to be discovered, and how else could it be done?
Yeah, I think in the last century before last, there's a lot of emphasis on memorization, and the suggestion is that that type of training be minimized. And it didn't say to eliminate it; it says to minimize it with more influence in the idea of presenting seeds for thought. Yes.
To follow up with that, is this being done now? And if it is not, on whom does the responsibility fall as to presenting it in the school systems?
Well, it certainly starts with us individuals. Yes, right now we have a very top-down approach in education in this country, and it's frequently the case in other countries as well. So, but the government is supposed to be serving us, and not the other way around. So the responsibility is everywhere, really.
Well, to follow that question with this, if people are not aware of the seed ideas, karma and reincarnation, cyclic return, each human being being responsible for themselves, then, and the Theosophical students being spread all over the world and not perhaps located in key positions in the education system, on whom then does this responsibility fall? If the Theosophical homes raise their children, they still are sent to a school system.
It's very difficult for the Theosophical children to
become functional in the society you live in.
Absolutely.
So then are you saying it then becomes individual responsibility even in the school system without being concerned about side issues, to just present these seed ideas to the student body in any environment besides the classroom?
Well, some of the issues of today, well, this student sees a separation of church and state is certainly important, if you will, but that gets us away from the idea of, because church is often thought of as spirituality, and it gets us away from even touching that in the classroom. So these kinds of things need to be ironed out from the bottom up, but it's up to us to get in there and do what we can, present those seed ideas. You can put them in. We had a student that was a tour guide, and he would throw in Theosophy in his tours, and nobody ever knew it. That's okay, that's the kind of thing you want to deal with. And the idea of karma and reincarnation, we have reincarnation cases, thousands of them out there now, and there's plenty of evidence to show from a scientific standpoint as well as from the ancient wisdom standpoint that there's something to say about that. But people don't really understand. They don't bridge that gap between personality and the idea of reincarnation. So Yeah, it's up to us to do that, and it's that's why it's taking such a long time. Everything it moves very slowly. We learn very slowly, and we get it implemented, and it just takes a long time to do it, thousands of millions of years. And with a hand back here. Yeah.
Yes, I just wanted to add on to really what you just said. For example, using the tour guide as an example does throw in some of the ideals of Theosophy once in a while, and so it doesn't necessarily have to be an element of spirituality. You know, like for example, the principles of ethics across the board. That is something that serves as an advantageous.
Of course, it's advantageous to everything concerned.
Exactly, but
all the religions and all the sciences.
Emphasized.
What's that?
But not even that is emphasized in the school system.
No.
It's centered on getting, achieving. So even when I was in college, I saw students that would do anything just to get, to achieve, attain.
Right.
You know, so.
Yeah.
But yeah, I just wanted to throw that in there, that there are ways in which the ideals of Theosophy do go across the board to really serve others in the community if they are implemented, you know, such as ethics and other things that serve as a commonality. So
Yeah.
it doesn't have to be necessarily
All these things that even the testing, this constant testing that goes on, perhaps it serves a purpose, but you know it could be totally overblown. When a teacher has to serve the testers, then that's going too far. And when you can think back, when you can go to school for 20 years and not have ever heard of Plato, you know, something's wrong. And something needs to be fixed, you know, because these great teachers have come to us for a reason, and we need to pay attention to what they taught.
You said the biggest defect of the West was the separation of thought and action. Is there any remedy that would be easy for us to bring those things back together?
Well, yeah, I mean, each individual has to, in ethics and so forth, we have to embody them. And by so doing, you have to incorporate thought and action. The thing that gets emphasized all the time is the first thing is thought. You know, when you first think of something, if you think it's good, you dwell on it. If you think it's not good, you cast it out. And the next thing is should be action based on that thought. If you're doing something because somebody else says to do it, you know, it doesn't make sense, but we'll do it anyway, then that's not good.
But you also talked about ideas, that the higher realms are based on ideas. So this question, I think, refers to that.
Right.
That if your ideas are towards unity, community, service to others, in other words, based on ethics, then the idea, when transferred through the thought form into action, will be altruistic. Well, I think that's the question that the student is asking in the back, how to link those together so that the end result when you act is for the benefit of the other, rather than just being selfish and concentrated on yourself. Because as the other student said, even in college, people are so concentrated on achievement, they forget about helping the other person a little bit, who perhaps is behind. In this student's time, there were that cooperative attitude in the classroom where we help one another. Even the student used to ask for help, and the teacher would assign one who was good at that subject to help that particular a student who lacked in that subject. But that kind of cooperative activity is not visible today. If it exists, the student is not aware of it. And I think that question relates to it.
Oh yeah, a teacher once stated,
Not
that
teacher-student
she
relationship.
said, attitude is more important than aptitude. Attitude gets back to motive.
He's talking about how do you follow the idea
How do you follow the
into
idea?
for the benefit of the other, and that's
Right.
what needs to be
For the benefit
concentrated
of-
on.
Absolutely. Well, it gets back to motive. If you're thinking about yourself only, well, you can't improve everything unless you improve yourself. But if you're improving yourself as a selfish thing, rather than as in your universal thinking, is it good for everyone or everything? Then that needs to be tweaked. That thought needs to be tweaked some.
But I think when you are in a position to exert that influence, that's one thing. But during that growth process, what Mr. Wadia had said was that the seed ideas that are implanted in the children at a young age will carry through.
Mhm.
But if they're not there, then what are these people supposed to do?
It all gets back to the individual, if you will,
Not to the family.
and to the family. Well, everything has a role in this.
But we
The
have,
individual, the family, the government, and so forth. You know.
but family is the core of the universe.
Mm-hmm.
It is where we learn, is in our home environment. And so we need to educate the mothers. It's the mothers that impart this knowledge, this the seed ideas to their kids. If they don't know it, they couldn't possibly give it.
Yes. Comment?
I don't know, it's not a question, more of a comment, but what this is having me think about is courage, because our society is very fit in the box, check off the things,
Get the check, yeah.
do this, this is what you're supposed to do, and this is what we would classify as success. So I think what I see as lacking in a lot of ways is that people are scared to not be like everyone around them, or even if they have a thought that I don't necessarily agree with this, it's easier to go with the flow and be like everybody else than it is to say I don't agree. And
Yes.
so I think it's important to reassess, first teaching kids to critically think as opposed to just do A, B, C, D. And also that we should find those people who are saying those things in our community and then support them and encourage that type of like honest, open discussion rather than just go along like everybody else and just say, oh, it's just easier just to do what everybody else is doing,
Right.
and like my priorities are just going to be to get a good job and have a house, and then I won't worry about anybody else or the greater good or the whole of society.
And then you come to just to add on.
Well said.
And just to add on to what she's saying, and then it's about conformity. So then you come to realize that because, again, and also add on, because people have not discovered their gift, they're building up a life according to conformity, what society says.
Mm-hmm.
So, teaching your kids to think critically and also think liberally and think as an individual so they can have the exploration and find out and discover their gift.
Yeah, we have to, do that ourselves, within ourselves, and then move that out to society,
Of course, to industry, yeah.
including the ballot box.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Well,
Well, being active in many ways. It's encouraged to be active. Although when we're here, we try to stay with the philosophy, and but when we go out there, we put our thinking into action. I might answer your question.
I think his mom answered his question.
She did.
To teach our children freedom of thought
Mm-hmm.
and critical thinking for themselves is very important. But with the seed ideas implanted in them, that also bears fruit. Because if you are grown up with karma and reincarnation as a fact in your life, your choices will depend on that basis, because it's ethical to consider all the others that you're in touch with in this life, because you're going to come back and redo what you have not done correctly in the next one, because you can only carry what you perfect in this life. It becomes part of that knowledge basis you're carrying from life to life. It's going to add to it, because only what is spiritual and beneficial, altruistic, can be incorporated into that thread soul. Other than that, it's going to stay right here. So children with that kind of background have an edge in promoting those kinds of attitudes. But you also see around the world individuals who get either put in a position when, like that girl who was shot in Pakistan, and she stood up and said, no, girls need to be educated also. So she has picked up that thread and is going with it. She survived the shot, got repaired, and now she lectures and does her charity work in that department. So there are those individuals who see the need for something and pick up and go with it, and they have courage to do so.
Absolutely, yeah. And frequently a circumstance which is of your own making, maybe maybe something that sounds terrible can be turned around into a positive thing, and that's what she did in that
Absolutely.
case.
Well, there are
She's
others
a very
who-
impressive lady, by the way.
Yeah, she's
Yeah.
very impressive and very bright and very compassionate.
Mhm.
She is not selfish. She is very selfless in her attitude towards life, and that is what needs to be expressed. So when we come across those kind of situations, sometimes perhaps it wakes us to do what we are here to do,
Yeah.
to pick up that thread.
Yeah, but the idea is, I guess, you support those who you think are in sync with your thinking, and when you get an opportunity, you step forward. You
Yeah.
know.
But most of the writings does say that, and the student in the back also said it, that if you see things in society that you can support, you should go out and support it and not leave those individuals to sink, because we can uplift by joining them, and
Absolutely.
the effort can gather strength that way, which is what the student said in the back.
Yep.
And that's what Theosophy says. Don't be shy, get involved in your society, in your environment, but not in a negative way, but in a positive way. Only support things that will be beneficent societally to everybody.
And that's why there's a lot of emphasis on not succumbing to your passions and desires. That also helps with your critical thinking, right?
Mhm.
If you're very concerned with your selfish desires and passions, that will influence your thinking in a certain way. And that's why Theosophy constantly advocates for not being concerned with them, to let them go, so that your higher thoughts can influence your behavior and thoughts. So.
But some people get in front of the mirror every morning. I'm not this body, I'm not this personality, I am that, which is the higher self.
Well,
Which is, that's the truth, that it's very difficult to live with that at all times. We have these lower tendencies that pull that down, and you just gotta keep working at it.
so this is a transition age, and during the transition change, everything changes very fast. I think the other problem we have as individuals is to get used to the change, because it's occurring so fast. When you look at the communication media, for instance, they're adding modalities to it all the time, and the younger generation perhaps adjusts to it better, but the older generation is having a little bit of lagging. So that also is a consideration for this age. But how then is this age going to give rise to a better one if people are not aware of that continuity that you're talking about, that consciousness is on a continuum? Just because we drop the body, the consciousness does not stop. Otherwise, immortality would be just a word.
It's
Would it not?
it's something that's going to take probably a lot of effort and maybe a lot of time too. We're talking hundreds of years. I mean, my gosh, I was sitting here just thinking about some of the words that came out today. This is not going to happen tomorrow, but it will happen if we are steadfast at it, and that continuity of consciousness has to be there. And you would, it's just reincarnation or karma. People have some idea these days of what karma is. They frequently resist the reincarnation part, and without that philosophy, none of this makes sense.
But there are a lot of young people out there searching for the truth, and if they are critical thinkers for themselves, they will choose the right ones for themselves eventually. Even if it is not taught in school, I think there are a lot of young people who reject the old way of doing things and the old way of thinking. They're more community oriented, they're more social adjustment oriented. They want things to happen to protect large groups. The young people now have taken the gun issue in their hands, and they're saying, we're going to fix it. Our parents didn't do the job, we're going to do it. And this student admires those young minds who have the courage to stand up to the gun lobby.
Or courage to do other things that are right. Is sweet, she's a Scandinavian girl addressing the United Nations. How dare you? She said, do these kinds of things. You know, allow these things to go unchallenged. You know, you don't expect us to do all that, do you? 16, 17 years old. You know.
Yeah, because they have clarity.
She's right.
Well, they have clarity. They can see into the future as to what it is bringing. We perhaps are in the last stage of our lives, but they're at the beginning. They have a whole 100-year period to live, and they want to make it better. They want the environment to be more conducive to good health, unity, productivity for everyone, not just for the 2% at the top. So they do understand the issues. They're smart enough to do so, and they have critical thinking on their side and courage to stand up for it.
That's the stuff that we need to support.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Was there, Jessica, you had?
Oh, I was just thinking also that, I was thinking about cycles, and that sometimes the way I see like evolution is kind of like a river. I mean, and it's heading to a certain place, like with or without each drop of us, you know, and it will eventually get there to wherever it's going. There's like a momentum, right?
There's a lot to be said for that, but it's also said that nature is there for us. And the other side of it is we affect nature. So with this evolution, this flow of evolution, yes, the next age is the golden age. And we get some idea as to how long it's going to be, but it's really up to us as to bring that thing into effect.
Sure.
So,
sure.
so we have something to do with it. Yeah, go ahead.
It's there's some sense of comfort in knowing that we're heading towards a goal that eventually is going to get there, and that there's cosmic forces that are propelling that are, it's not just mankind doesn't have to solely just band together. You know, there's like a greater thing that's propelling this. So, and then there's also
we have to
everything
go along to
happens
get along, right?
in cycles. So when bad stuff is happening, that means your quote unquote bad stuff. It's that's preparing the way for something new, right? So it's not necessarily meaning that all of, even if we're in a darker age, that could just mean that we're getting ready for a lot more light
Well, a lot
to come
more. Yeah, and we've got a lot of opportunities in this darker age.
in. Yeah.
Yes.
But there's one fact that we must all remember in this transition age, and that is that this is the fourth round. We are the fifth subrace of the fifth root. And we're told at the middle of this fourth, nature will not propel anymore because we have become self-conscious entities and our thinking is based on our own thought process, that nature cannot make those decisions on our behalf. Up to the middle of the fourth, everything gets moved forward. All of the kingdoms are pushed towards a higher expression of themselves. Remembering that man is the highest animal, the most intelligent, the most spiritual, the most ethical on earth, all of the other kingdoms look up to us for help. And we have a tremendous responsibility, not just to nature, but to all of the kingdoms below us, as well as all of the kingdoms above us, because we are the link. And nature will not push us forward anymore. It says our effort is dependent on self-induced, self-devised effort.
Right.
But the cycles will run their course, and that great lodge that protects humanity from itself can only do so much. The writing states that they can only move a small input into it, that the cycles they cannot interfere with.
Right. Yeah.
They help wherever they can, but the cycle must go on.
That great lodge is a much more influence than we might think, but they can't do it for us. We have to do it ourselves.
Each human soul at this stage of development must participate willingly and knowingly with knowledge in that process of moving humanity forward. Those who are awake has the responsibility to do so.
But nature will, nature will help us if we
Help
go
it.
in its direction. But if we get many opportunities, but if we just constantly don't do it, nature says goodbye. It'll shake us off. It shakes us off.
Yes, it has its own powers, earthquakes, tsunamis, sinkholes. It will make itself known to us and what we are doing wrong to it, because it is there for our benefit, but it has a purpose. Its purpose is to move everything forward. So we have to become cooperative workers with nature. And if we go against it, then it will let us know that we're not doing it right.
Exactly.
It has many different ways of doing it.
Exactly.
And starvation is one of them too. Even if we plant things and they grow, does not have the same nutrition for us. We will starve in a different way.
Right.
Our health.
Yeah. Well, talking of evolution, evolution, humanity is one, and so we're all one with the universe. And next week is the Earth change. We'll be talking about that, focusing on that side of it, which is really one subject in the bigger picture. We will stop it here, and please join us next week.